You know how you get a text alert from the delivery driver before your food arrives, so your hungry kids stop freaking out? Vonage does that. You know how you get a text alert from the delivery driver before your food arrives, so your hungry kids stop freaking out? Vonage does that.
Hello. So the current talk will be on the PEP 458, Secure PyPI downloads with signed repository metadata. And the speaker will be Kai Shank, is the staff security engineer at Datadog. He helped in researching and developing the update framework and Uptane. Let's welcome him.
Thank you, Ivan. Very, very kind of you. So yeah, I'm Trishan Karthikupasamy. I'm a security engineer at Datadog, and very, very pleased to talk to my fellow Malaysians and of course everybody else about our work. My colleagues and I have been doing on securing PyPI downloads with signed repository metadata. So let's see what that means. So first, we begin by setting the background. We're talking about the context of community repositories here. And the most notable example, of course, I'm sure everyone in the room is using it, is the Python package index. PyPI is one of them. NPM is the one for JS. Ruby has its Ruby gems. Docker container images for a Docker Hub registry for all sorts of software applications. You get the idea. These are the examples. So what defines community repositories? What I mean when I say community repositories are basically file servers where all the software is contributed by third-party developers, right? Like many of us in the room, I'm sure. And the software are organized by projects. So you've got projects like Django, Scapy, heck, even Tough is one of them. So you have typically an order of tens of thousands of these projects, and the number of files, packages that they contribute in total can be in the order of hundreds of thousands at the very least. The other defining thing is that you can add a new project or package in the order of every few minutes, for example, on PyPI. That was the case a few years ago when I last looked at it. Probably the rate has improved vastly now. So they're very vibrant places. They're very vibrant places. They're the well of open source. Some might say the engine that drives open source. It's a shared file repository where people contribute software. They use all of the software together, right? There's all sorts of interesting mutual dependencies. You can kind of think of it like a vibrant savanna where everyone comes together and collaborate. So 99.999% of the time, life is good. Community repositories are fantastic. But what happens should, God forbid, touch wood here, the repository gets compromised? And because of the same virtue that everyone shares it, the same source, you suddenly have the same source becoming a poisoned well, which is terrible. Nobody wants that. So we want to make sure that we avoid this scenario. We make sure that even if the repository is broken into, it's not a game over scenario for everybody. And so just to drive the point a little bit home, to make sure that it's not theoretical, the same way people thought the pandemic early last year was theoretical, which unfortunately it wasn't. So until recently, I would say people really didn't take this scenario very seriously. But just to drive the point home, let's tell a few scary stories. So scary story number one is the Flame malware, which some of you might remember. This is quite a few years ago, within the past decade, I believe, if I recall correctly. Someone poisoned the Microsoft Windows update system. And they didn't do this by compromising Microsoft directly. It's not like anyone inserted a backdoor into Windows. No, their attack was much more sophisticated and clever. They found a way to abuse the peer-to-peer feature that Microsoft Windows Update had, which, for network efficiency makes a lot of sense. So you get the updates from your peers instead of from Microsoft.com directly. And what happened was that they found a way to, Microsoft has a signing certificate, and they found a way to break the cryptography in it. What they did was break the MD5 hashing algorithm, which now is considered deprecated. It was theoretically deprecated even a while ago, but this attack really drove it home. Even academics were surprised. It was a novel cryptographic attack. They found a way to reverse engineer the key and pretend to be Microsoft. It is a weakness in the hashing algorithm. So they had another certificate that basically looked like it came from Microsoft. Anyway, long story short, nobody knows who did this, but this is a very sophisticated nation-state attack, widely suspected. This nation-state pretended to be Microsoft in order to peer-to-peer slowly distribute this malware that wasn't doing anything most of the time. It started out from Europe, started spreading, slowly made its way into Iran, which was trying to have its own nuclear program back then. They had these things going on nuclear centrifuges, and the malware was very clever. So it activated only in Iran on this particular Siemens PLC machines. And the thing would basically very subtly mess with the nuclear, the centrifuges used to, I believe, enrich this nuclear material. So once in every 10,000 rotations or so, things would mess up. And guess what? They peacefully interrupted the nuclear enrichment program. So it was a very interesting, very sophisticated attack. And this was in 2012, if I got the date right. Scary story number 2. There was, I don't know how many of you remember this tool, but when I was a young man using Windows, there's this very popular tool called CCleaner that we use to clean up malware or bloated registry and so on your Windows machines. Unknown to Avast, who was busy acquiring, I believe it was Avast, acquiring CCleaner at the same time, what they didn't know was that someone had broken into CCleaner infrastructure. And they introduced a backdoor, and so the backdoor got built, compiled, built, signed using CCleaner code, distributed millions of times. But the interesting thing was that these attackers didn't care about the millions of downloads. They used it only to target very high value targets, like 10 or so tech companies. And one of them, later on, seems to have been Asus. Their own software updates got backdoored. And many people suspect that it was the CCleaner. They first got a foothold as CCleaner, and then they broke into Asus, and then Asus customers now got compromised. Most recently, December of last year, you might have heard of the SolarWinds attack, which really, finally, for some reason, despite all of these attacks over the last decade at the very least, finally, this seems to have been I will actually talk about another pivotal event next. But anyway, SolarWinds is an enterprise, IT enterprise monitoring company. And unfortunately, the same thing that happened to CCleaner and Avast happened to them. This time, the customer base was much larger. Microsoft, government agencies, it was terrible. The fallout was just, very strong words were used. And so I hate to break it like this, but imagine what if the same thing happened to PyPI, which we all love and use every day here? Can you imagine the fallout? It's one thing to attack particular software companies. Can you imagine getting them all by breaking into a shared community repository like PyPI in the first place? There's an easy, instant way to get into all tech companies, right? Wouldn't you imagine? How many people use PyPI? Tech companies, schools, government agencies, healthcare, financial institutions, you name it. So, so the other, remember I talked about the other pivotal event that really drove the point home. People started taking this problem much more seriously than I ever did before. One of it was SolarWinds, end of last year. And the other thing was the U.S. executive order in cybersecurity, which you might have heard. And they talked about a great number of things we need to improve as a country. But one of it was enhancing what everyone now calls the software supply chain security problem. So this sort of attacks, people coming in and backdooring your software Worst case, going into a shared community repository, poisoning the well kind of attack. Finally, the US is stepping up, taking this thing very seriously and trying to fix it. Okay, so we have a big problem ahead of us. We have nation state attackers who've got the time and the money, okay, to personally attack people. So these are very serious attackers, and your threat model needs to be very strong. It's basically they can break into your infrastructure. So let's take a look at how previous security systems hold up against this very serious kind of threat model. Well, people typically used to, I don't know about you, but when I first, back then, they had a job description called full stack developer. I used to be one of them. This was around 2010. And I remember TLS was not widely used. If you downloaded things from PyPI back then, it was over plain HTTP. And this was before the Snowden leaks. And I remember being worried even back then. It's like, what happens if there's a man-in-the-middle attack here? But anyway, luckily, thanks in part to those leaks, people started using TLS everywhere, especially because browser makers started incentivizing everybody to turn on encryption. So TLS is good. It protects you from man-in-the-middle attackers, right? Assuming there's no weaknesses in cryptography, it's very hard to pretend to be, say, PyPI, HTTPS, ://PyPI.org. Great. But the problem is, remember how strong our threat model is. Our threat model is someone can break into PyPI itself. So who cares? Now you have an encrypted tunnel directly to attackers who control PyPI. So yes, the server is PyPI.org. But do you know who you're talking to on PyPI.org? So TLS is not compromised resilient in that sense. GPG is another common code signing mechanism that people use to this day. GPG is a crypto system by itself. It's actually one of the most time-tested crypto systems out there. By itself, that feature alone is actually quite strong. The problem is that it has a very unusable key distribution and revocation mechanism. So in practice, what I found several years ago when I looked at this on PyPI, the vast majority of projects do not attach GPG signatures to packages, okay? And number two, how do you find the keys for the packages? Think about it. Just because you attach a signature to it doesn't mean there's a famous XKCD comic, making fun of this GPG signed emails. Oh, great, the email is signed. That doesn't mean anything. How do you know to sign by the right key? So, and people have fallen into this problem before. It's the Tor project Tor browser. People distributed fake keys. So imagine we might be able to in the room go and find the right keys and do all this work, which is tedious even for us. Imagine grandma trying to do this. So sorry, but grandma can't use GPG and try to figure out the right keys and figure out whether she did the right thing. She just needs something that works. That's the right thing for her. Okay, so basically, the too long didn't read is previous security systems, they do not have a property that we're looking for. We're looking for compromised resilience. Remember, people are unfortunately going to break into you, right? It's a matter of time, a hack. It's safe to assume it's a question of when, not if, okay? So it's like someone coming to you in the medieval age, you're a medieval king, and someone tells you, don't worry about it, I'll build you an impenetrable fortress. And your first answer should be, well, that's it. That's next to impossible, if not impossible. So what you want to do instead is to engineer your castle to be robust, so you don't lose the keys to the kingdom just because there's a single breach somewhere. So maybe you build your castle so that there's a moat around it with alligators swimming and guys going around with flamethrowers, so that attackers from outside look at you and think, you know what? I've got better things to do. I'm going to go somewhere else for an easier target. Okay, so the claim is the system called the update framework, or TUF, can help you build a compromised resilient community repository. So let's take a look at what that works. What the hell do we mean by a repository? A repository is just a server, just a fancy word for a server. It's a file distribution server, possibly backed by CDNs. And a repository contains two types of things. One is packages. Package, of course, is the thing we're all ultimately interested to download and use. It's the smallest unit of update. Could be an application or a library. And metadata is just data about these packages, or even other metadata. It's just information about. That's all it literally means. So when you say a metadata about package, typically it could be things like what's the hashes of the file? Because that's typically how you check the integrity of a file. When you downloaded it, is it the same thing when you downloaded it when someone uploaded it, or at least when it was published? Okay, and what's the file size and so on. Okay, so the update framework was designed, oh wow, a decade ago now. It was designed by my advisor and a few other people, his student and a few other people from the Tor project. I don't know. So the Tor project is basically building this anonymous a network that gives you anonymity. This is very useful if you say you're an activist in states that censor the internet there. You can use Tor to try to get around the censorship and read up about stuff, for example. But anyway, you can imagine why nation-state attackers would be interested in trying to compromise Tor, right? Something like Tor. Imagine poisoning the update there. Now all the dissidents are in trouble. So TUF was designed, and it's just a system. It's just a system for downloading packages and verifying packages. You basically don't fully trust the repository. You're like, hold on, I'll double check you. I'll try to make sure that what you gave me was what developers uploaded in the first place. I don't fully trust you. You could be compromised right now. And we just listen to grandma. We talk to grandma and say, hey, grandma, we have this very hard problem. All these nation-state attackers are after us. What do we do? And grandma gave us a few ideas, things she told us as a kid, and we just put them together in a package, and you get a very strong system as a result. So let's take a look at some of these design principles. You basically want to survive a key compromise. That's the basic idea. We assume that you're going to be signing things, right? You're going to be using signing keys. The idea is to make sure that compromising most of these keys are not going to be fatal for you. I mean the keys you can most easily get. Okay, so the first design principle is separation of duties. Grandma always told us, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? Same thing here. We just signed different pieces of metadata. Remember the metadata I talked about? Just information about packages. Just information about packages or other metadata. So you can have metadata or metadata, depending on how deep the layers go. But the point is just information about something. We don't need to worry about what it is right now. But the point is, unlike GPG, for example, if you take a look at things like Debian and most Linux distributions, not to call out any one of them in particular, yeah, sure, they sign stuff with GPG, but they sign everything with one single GPG key. That's like putting all your eggs in one basket. So I break into one of them, I break into the signing infrastructure, I get to tamper with everything. Not so in TUF, with different people signing different things. And we don't need to get into the terrible detail. For the purposes of our talk, this role is going to be the most important one. When I say a role, it can be a man or a machine. Doesn't matter what it is. So the target's role basically gives you the information about the packages you're looking for. And it's got a cool little feature we'll use a lot for this PEP. It's got a feature called delegations. Targets can say, hey, you're looking for A star packages, A.star packages. Go ask A1. I don't know anything about it. A1 says, oh, yeah, I'm the guy for A star. You're looking for A dot packages? Go ask A2 about it. You see, I can cleanly separate the duties of signing what to which precise roles. So the BC role here is going to sign all B and C packages. You get the idea. You can recursively go on and splitting duties like this. So that's a very nice feature that we'll talk about how we distribute the signing responsibility in PyPI. Anyway, snapshot is just a role that gives you timeliness. Make sure that there's no funny things, funny, weird. All these things are different versions. You want to make sure that they are not combined in an arbitrary way. It's like, how do I put it? You want to make sure that the newspaper for that day is coherent. It only has news for that day. You don't want a newspaper where it has, you open one page, is the news for today. You open the next page, is the news for yesterday. And you open the next page, is news for tomorrow. That's somebody's messing with your newspaper. That doesn't make sense. You want the coherent news for that day. That's basically what a snapshot role does. Timestamp just tells you whether anything has changed. Very quick way to find out. And then you have the root role. where that's the only thing you need to know about. I claim that you only need, it looks like there are many keys in the system, right? In fact, there can be an arbitrary number of keys after this to the right of the picture. But I claim that by having only the root keys, you can figure out the ways to the rest of the system. You can change all the other keys and not lose sleep. So transparent key distribution and revocation mechanisms. Without this, you can't recover from a key compromise, you see? So it's very important that you have this. Anyway, the point is, don't worry about the details. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's it. So many keys in the system that attackers can't possibly get them all. They have to do a lot of work. We'll combine it with other design principles. The other one is threshold signatures. I don't know about you guys, but so we asked Grandma. Hey Grandma, we've got the science software. What should we do? And Grandma told us, listen, just like they launched nuclear missiles, no one person can launch a nuclear missile. Same thing when you sign software. No one person should be responsible for signing critical software. Make it at least 2 people, or you can make it 3 out of 5 people. You get the idea. 6 out of 10 people, whatever threshold, whatever quorum you want to decide. You can say that 3 out of 4 people need to come together and sign off with different keys before you trust the software package at all. So you can see attackers, unless they steal at least 3 of those keys, they can't tamper with your packages. And then we build PKI basically into the system so that you can explicitly change keys in case keys have been stolen or keys have been lost. We also make keys expire, for example, yearly, so that even if attackers get keys, the amount of time for when things can happen is very limited. In fact, you don't have to wait to a year to do this. Very, very sensitive, important keys. You can make it expire quickly. And one of the last design principles is that we take it even further and say some of these keys are so important, like the root role. This is basically, if you compromise root, it's game over. All right, so what you want to do is keep the keys. Not only can you use many keys for the root, you can say at least 6 out of 10 different people must come together and sign off on it, but all those keys must be kept in, I don't know, in a trusted hardware and things like YubiKeys, in a nuclear-proof Swiss bunker somewhere underground there, right? You get the idea. So you make it very hard for attackers to get 6 of those keys to come together and try to change the root keys, for example. And then you have things like diversity of cryptographic algorithms. You want to make sure that, so we don't just use one hashing algorithm, we can use many. We also use many different signing algorithms, many different key types, so that even if attackers manage to break something like MD5, which happened to Microsoft, guess what? We're not using MD5 at all. We're using SHA-2. You can easily use SHA-3 at the same time. What are the odds that attackers can break SHA-2 and SHA-3 at the same time? Or RSA and ED25519 at the same time? So tough, basically, the too long didn't read it, with apologies to the Nintendo Corporation, is a bit like playing Pokemon. You got to catch them all to do serious damage to the system. Okay, so now let's get to the real meat of the matter. Let's talk about PEP 458. How does it actually work? And you know, how do we claim that it protects PyPI? So this is the PEP. I highly encourage you Google it and read it for the devil in the details. The basic idea is actually quite simple. You don't need to worry about, remember, we've looked at some of these friends before. We've seen the root, we've seen timestamp, we've seen snapshot, we've seen targets. Now remember I talked about delegations. So here we start with the bare minimum security. We have PyPI basically use a robot signing for all packages on behalf of all projects. Okay, why do we start here? This is a bit like TLS, isn't it? If you think about TLS, what is the weakness? What is the problem with TLS? It's basically a robot, a machine signing everything. There are a few key differences here. One is the data here is actually protected at rest. But because you can compromise the robot at any time, you can also get the signatures at rest to change at any time. So really, the security here becomes almost equivalent to TLS. Basically, if you break into PyPI, you get to tamper with all packages for all projects, which doesn't sound great. But the key difference between here and TLS is that you have a much more robust mechanism for recovering from damage. You can change the keys for the delegations, And the root key is still not affected. Everything in green here basically are offline keys. Only the red keys are at risk. They're owned by machines. So anyone breaks into PyPI can tamper with the red keys, but not the green keys. And you can use the green keys to safely recover, change keys, and move users who have lucky enough not to have been compromised yet. You can safely rotate them to new keys. So this is a good start. It's better than nothing. But this is also most crucially laying the foundation for much stronger security, which I will talk about next. And the status now for this PEP, I'm very happy to say, is that it's a work in progress. Thanks to some funding from Facebook and other people, Mozilla also, I believe. I'm sorry if I got the names wrong. But basically, thanks to some generous sponsors, this PEP has been under implementation since actually last year, since the beginning of the pandemic. That's right. And we're nearly done finishing implementing it. Work is blocking currently on a contractor, but we're hoping that the contractor will be unblocked soon and it would actually be finished, rolling into production by the end of the year. Hopefully people will be able to use this in practice. Actually, invisibly behind the scenes, when you use pip install in the future, you will actually be protected by PEP 458. Very excited to see that. Okay, but like I said, our job is not done. We're still trusting a robot to sign all packages for all projects. Can we do better? Can we have more separation of duties? And I claim yes. That's why we also wrote PEP 480, which is a follow-up to 458. I highly recommend you Google it also for more of the technical details. But all we care about for the purpose of this talk is the high-level idea. So what's the difference here? Well, you can see there's some similarity already. The previous one, we call it the minimum security model. And you can see the minimum security model, this robot signing for packages, right? And we still have it here. The difference is that now we have two new delegations. Now we allow project developers themselves to take the responsibility of signing for their own packages, for their own projects, using their own offline keys. These are not keys sitting on PyPI. PyPI is not doing the signing for them. PyPI is signing only one thing. So let's talk about two things separately. First is that all the developers here are signing, for example, Django or NumPy or Request. They're all signing for their own projects using their own, for example, YubiKeys. Okay? Or it could be their own GPG keys, actually. There's no reason why you can't use GPG with TUF. It's just a crypto system. We just don't use its key distribution mechanism. Anyway, the point is you have your own signing keys on your machines and you sign for your own packages. And then you upload your packages along with the signed metadata. Okay, so these are packages now signed. They're protecting data at rest. You upload them to PyPI, and PyPI, all it has to do is sign one thing. It has to say which keys belong to which projects. So it will say, PyPI will basically tell pip, it's not you, you're telling pip, hey, get me requests. What happens behind the scenes is you do all this stuff magic, and basically PyPI administrators here in green are telling you, okay, I have verified the request developers, and here are their public keys. So this is a safe chain of trust, you see? This is a verified way to find out what the correct public keys for requests or NumPy are in this case. So you know when you're downloading requests in NumPy, you're getting the goods you are looking for. Even if someone breaks into PyPI, they cannot tamper with the packages. Why? They don't have the administrator keys to change the chain of trust, and they don't have the developer keys to change the packages themselves. It's basically like immutable data at this point. It's frozen. It's like a mosquito, million-year-old mosquito stuck in amber, and there's nothing you can do about it without. Let's imagine the amber is made out of diamond in this case, for the metaphor to hold. So unless you break the cryptography, you reverse engineer the cryptography, which is a problem as difficult as cutting a diamond. Okay. Right. And so that is the basic idea. In the beginning, projects will be in a tricky place where once developers claim them, the problem is that the job of manually verifying that a project belongs to who they say they are, the developers, this will take some time. This takes the manual verification process. Not going to happen immediately. But in order to make them available when they first register themselves, you want a machine to do the job. So this chain is untrustworthy, actually. So in this case, hypothetically, Django just registered their public keys. They are signing for their packages at rest. The problem is someone who breaks into PyPI can tamper with the chain of trust. Look at the chain of trust here. What's the difference? This chain of trust, all is green. Offline keys, that's what it means. None of the keys required to modify the chain of trust are sitting on PyPI. They're sitting literally offshore, as it were. But the problem with this chain of trust is there's a weak link. The machine is delegating the keys for the moment just to make the projects immediately available to users. So they're temporarily insecure, but periodically, say every month or so, even every week, depending how you set up your automation, PyPI would issue a challenge to developers to say, prove to me you really are the owner of requests. Maybe you have to sign that you own the GitHub URL for requests and so the GitHub repo, sorry, for requests and so on. And so similar to the way for like Let's Encrypt, why would Let's Encrypt give you an SSL certificate for your domain, says example.com. They will issue you a challenge. You have to answer the challenge, right? Proving ownership of the domain name. Same thing here. Once you prove ownership of the project, then PyPI will safely fix, remember the immutable thing? They will fix the chain of trust in such a way that you are now responsible for signing your own packages, not them. And PyPI is responsible only for establishing the chain of trust to you. And this is what protects you when someone breaks into PyPI. All the projects with the completely green chain of trust, they're completely protected. Nothing to worry about, to lose sleep, even if PyPI is broken into. The stuff in red, we do only to allow people who don't want to sign their own packages for whatever reason. Okay, you don't want the security, no problem. You still get some man-in-the-middle kind of security, similar to TLS, but not when PyPI itself is broken into. So that's up to you. And then temporarily, projects, when they register themselves, they say, hey, trust me, I'm request, it would begin here until it's verified somehow. It's temporarily at risk, but temporarily. That's the basic idea. And the status is this is to do. We need to finish PEP 458 first. Like I said, is the foundation. You can kind of think of 458 as a subset of 480. You see, 480 is just slightly more complicated. That's it. Okay. I mean, the implementation, the real complexity comes in the verification of developers. But this stuff, the delegation stuff itself, is actually very trivial. The only complexity is in figuring out how to verify developers are who they say they are. And even then, there are good ways to solve that problem. And we actually discussed several mechanisms in the paper and the PEP we wrote for it. So hopefully this will come in the several next years. But I just wanted to give the idea of how what we have in mind for the ultimate future of package security for PyPI. So, and let's talk about some numbers. So what's the bottom line? What do I get out of for all this work that I did? So I ran an experiment. This was several years ago. I got a month of downloads for PyPI, a whole month of downloads. It was a big data kind of problem. I forget the exact numbers, but it was huge. And so we ran this hypothetical experiment. Let's imagine that PyPI was compromised at the beginning of that month, completely. Just attackers were sitting there unbeknownst to PyPI and tampering with every single package download for that entire month. Okay, and so basically at the end of the month, half a million users basically would have been completely owned, would have been completely compromised. Just unmitigated, unstopped body count lost here, right? Just the body count just piles up. There's no stopping it. So this is the baseline that we're comparing to. This is the TLS GPG model that doesn't give you compromised resilience. Okay, and then we said, okay, fine. Let's take, what's the biggest bang for the buck? What's the least amount of work we can do to get a lot of security? So we said, why not do this PEP 480 thing? Imagine it has been installed in place. Okay, so we have we have projects that are entirely signed by their own respective developers, by their verified developers. How many of these projects do you actually need to protect? Let's say we protected only the top 1% popular projects, which is around 500 projects or so tops at the time. You immediately protect nearly 3/4 of all downloads. Look at the difference between no security and just encouraging 1%, just 1% of the top projects to sign for their own packages. Look at the difference. And then you can do cute little things. I'm not going to talk about the difference between how you get even lower. The idea is that you start nudging and incentivizing people to, when they try to update their projects, now we've gotten the top 1% to sign. We've closed the body count massively. Let's see what else little things we can do to try to get the body count even lower. So over time, you encourage more and more projects to not just the top 1%, but more and more projects. You can see marginal returns, but still significant. I mean, just compared to the unmitigated case, huge. And in the maximum security model, where all packages are signed using verified chain of trust, except for new projects, only new projects. By which I mean, the only projects at risk that are at risk or compromised are the projects that were created in that month. That whole month where PyPI was compromised. That's the maximum security model. Only new projects created in that month. Everything else created before then, completely protected using offline keys. You protect more than 99% of users. That's, I think, even more effective than some of the COVID vaccines we have right now. So I think you get the idea what kind of security you can get here. So future work. So this is PEP 480, as strong as it is. Remember, we're beginning of the foundation, PEP 458, laying the foundation for PEP 480, which gives you a lot of protection. 99% of users can be protected, right? But we can still do better, because there's one problem we still haven't solved, which is how are the packages themselves built in the first place? These days, most developers, it used to be back in the old days, and I'm actually older than I look, but back in the old days, people used to hand-build packages, and use setup tools and whatnot to package it in your machines, get a tarball out of it or a Python wheel out of it, do signing, GPG signing, let's say at the very least, and upload it to PyPI. Not so these days. These days you have GitHub Actions or GitLab or whatever CI/CD, Travis, you name it, Jenkins. You get the idea. The point is, developers are now using robots sitting in the cloud, in the sky, as I like to call it, to build and sign their packages. Why? Because this is much easier. You have messed up development environments on your laptop. Everyone has a different environment, even though they're the same developers in the same project. Nobody wants to touch the signing key because like radioactive material. There's very good reasons for using CI/CD. You can you have these robots immediately pulling in your source code, packaging it, and uploading it to PyPI. Great, fantastic. Many good reasons to do it. Problem is, what happens if someone breaks into your CI/CD? So the problem is now deeper in the software supply chain, you see. It's not to the moment when you upload it to PyPI, which is this step, which is the so-called last mile distribution problem, is that your package, when it was uploaded to PyPI itself, was already compromised, unfortunately, in the first place. You didn't compromise PyPI. You compromised the developers, or you compromised their GitHub repository, or you compromise their GitLab CI/CD, for example, right? Before they even hit PyPI. So that's why we made software supply chain deeper into the. So anyway, we propose using a sister project called Intoto, which will secure the supply chain for you. There's no time to get into the details, unfortunately. Maybe another day. But the basic idea is that it's kind of like playing the game of telephone. Are you familiar with the game of telephone? American kids, at least. I don't remember playing it as a Malaysian kid, which is unfortunate. But apparently American kids, they like to play this game called telephone, where you have to deliver a message, from one kid to another, right? Like passing a package to another person in the middle of a random conference. How do you know that it doesn't get tampered along the way? Same thing with the game of telephone. They say peas, and in the end it becomes all sorts of other things, and in the end the message becomes fleas. And you can think of that as sort of a man-in-the-middle attack. Someone is introducing noise into the system. So you want to make sure that you want to deliver peace to your user, not fleas, which would be very, very unfortunate. Anyway, too long didn't read. You can combine these two sibling projects, Intodo and Tough, to get what I call compromised resilient distribution. There's end-to-end security, basically, all the way from developers all the way to PyPI, to end users. Every single step is protected. From the moment source code is checked into the repository, developers sign in with their own YubiKeys and so on. So if something gets tampered in between GitHub and GitLab, you would know. Or if someone tries to mess with your CI/CD, it tries to package Python source code you never wrote, you would know. And then the distribution from Tough to you would also get all the right goods. So you get end-to-end security. Just think of it this way: you get end-to-end security between developers and end users. That's all you need to know. Every single little step along the way. So you can see how this is much stronger than even PEP 480. Because PEP 480 protects you from the tough the PyPI in this case, and you. But use Intodo, you go deeper into the software supply chain, how the package itself was built in the first place. So even if it is built by machines, you're still protected. In fact, we did it at Datadog. Maybe I should have inserted some slides about it. But for the Datadog agent integrations, some of you are using Datadog and using the agent integrations, you should be rest assured, because we're actually the first in the industry to do this. We've done this for at least 3 years now, before SolarWinds or supply chain attack security were even a buzzword. And now we've introduced something new called transparent compromise resilience, which uses this new project called Sixtor. Basically, the idea is you have something called a transparent or tamper evident ledger. It's just, you can think of it as an append-only log. Imagine you have a data structure where you can only ever add things to it. You can kind of think of it as a centralized blockchain if you're familiar with blockchain. You can keep adding blocks, and if someone tampers with previous blocks, you would know. It's just a chain of hashes. Same thing here. Merkle tree, basically, same idea. Anyway, point is, you don't even need to know about how it works. The point is this data structure where once you've added something, is basically frozen, like that amber, mosquito and amber. You have to keep building on top of the amber. You can add layers outside, but you can't peel back and change history. So now we can start recording the history of all tough metadata that in turn point to Intodo metadata that in turn point to the packages, how they were made. And this is a very strong system. So let me use a metaphor to describe how this works end-to-end. So Intodo is kind of like the thing. It's like Pfizer or Moderna or J&J or Sinopharm or whoever saying, this is how I made my vaccine. This is how much mRNA I use, or viral vectors and so on. This is how much lipids and how much other adjuvants I used. This is me saying, I'm Pfizer. This is how I did it. I vouch for it. Tough is kind of like the FDA saying, well, why should you trust Pfizer or Moderna or J&J or whoever in the first place, right? There's so many different types of vaccines. The metaphor is there's so many different types of projects on PyPI. Why should you trust them? So Tough, the FDA, which kind of like PyPI, kind of sort of, PyPI, sorry, kind of plays the role of the FDA telling you, here's why you should trust Django, because I vouch for them. I check their keys. It belongs to them. Here's why you should trust requests. Here's why you should trust NumPy. The other projects, I don't know. People just uploaded them to me. Use them at your own risk. My machine signed for them, and I can't guarantee about their security. My machine could have been compromised. I have no idea. We'll need to do deeper work. But all the other packages that I vouch for, that's good. And then finally, Sigstore is kind of like the CDC, acting like a Library of Congress, like a registry of telling you how every single vaccine approved by the FDA was ever made. What lot number, what expiry, how the vaccine was made, which supplier it came from, the entire history of the damn thing. So hopefully this somewhat timely metaphor makes rough sense. Okay, anyway, conclusions. I'm coming up to my time anyway. Too long didn't read. If you didn't get anything from this talk, don't worry about it. The thing you should remember is we are working on making PyPI compromise resilient, meaning even if someone hacks, breaks, infiltrates into PyPI, thanks to a technology called Tough, not the whole game is over. If you do things right, You can protect those. This will take significant amount of work, a certain number of years, but with very little work, you can protect more than 3/4 of the views. That alone is worth doing. So, and then you can go deeper. You can go deeper into the supply chain. That will take even more years of work. But the point is, it can be done. In fact, we've done it at Datadog. Okay, that's all you needed to know. And acknowledgements. None of this very complicated work would have been possible without all these other people who, unfortunately, I cannot take the time to personally acknowledge. But yeah. Anyway, it's teamwork. And now it's time for Q&A, which I think is appropriate since it's been 45 minutes, and we can leave 15 minutes for Q&A if people are interested. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. I know everything did not make sense. I'm sorry about that. But if you ask questions now, maybe hopefully we can... oh, by the way, you should reach out to us. If you're interested to join us, please come join us on the Tough channel, on the CNCF Slack, or find us on the updateframework.io website. You can find all those other links from there. Thank you.
Oh, trashing. Just nice, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And some questions. So,
great.
Our green Navarro asks, multi-sig is a very good idea. Still new to smart contract. Oh no, it's not a question, but he's just commenting on this.
Well, I can actually. So he looks like Eldrin. So thanks for your question. So Eldrin is saying this, the idea of multi-signatures, which is what we do in threshold signatures, right? It's like 6 out of 10 people signing. Yeah, somewhat similar thing here. Cryptocurrencies try to do something more clever because they have more performance constraints. They try to. So for us, there's literally 6 signatures there, up to at least 6 signatures, if not 10 signatures. Some crypto systems can encode all of the signatures in one signature, the size of one signature. So it's a very efficient way of doing it, which we haven't explored yet. But yeah, that's really the only difference. But otherwise, the idea is the same.
And the next question. He asked,
good question. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah. No, go ahead, please.
Yeah, would like the introduction of PEP 458 affect the PyPI mirrors, like on the verification, especially on the verification of the owners, developers, maintainers?
Yep, good question. Maybe let me try going back to my slide. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, there we go. Yes, so mirrors, good question. Mirrors, we thought about mirrors. So here's, okay. There's the complicated answer, which I'll give you first, and then there's a simple answer, which is what will happen in practice. The complicated answer is, for mirrors, you can only give them some of the least important roles. They won't even sign for some of the packages people don't want to sign. That will still be PyPI. PyPI will still be responsible for this layer, basically. Everything except for timestamp and snapshot, okay? The only thing you will give mirror is publishing timeliness information and consistency, which will give you some limited attacks, but not the end of the world kind of attacks. That's the worst they can do if you had to use mirrors. But guess what? The simple answer is PyPI has deprecated mirrors. There's no longer untrusted mirrors. They use CDNs now.
Next question. I'm not sure what this question is.
Oh, it's actually a good one. It's a good one. What PEP to handle devs losing offline signing keys or transfer ownership? Very good. This does happen in practice. Well, if you lose your keys, the same way you registered your keys with PyPI, you can also update it. The problem is you might temporarily be blocked because it's not like, depending on how busy PyPI is, they might not be able to replace your keys immediately. This is why you might want to mitigate that risk by using threshold signatures. So you can say if there's 4 developers, we want at least 3 of us. So you can tolerate the loss of 1, you see? So you can use threshold signatures to mitigate that risk. Transfers ownership, again, same thing. You do the key revocation thing. You change the keys.
Okay, I see. I don't see any other question, but there are some comments. Maybe I'll show the comments.
Sure.
Like Merkle tree.
Of course. Yes, blockchain. Yeah, exactly. Tough doesn't. So it's interesting. Tough, you can think of the timestamp role as sort of a Merkle tree, actually. And then, because that is actually the root of all the other metadata, that's how you find whether anything has changed very quickly. And then SIG_store is yet another Merkle tree on top of that. Toto plus tough on a blockchain makes a lot of sense. Exactly. Yeah. In Toto and tough on a blockchain. That's, you can think of it that way. Yes. Conceptually, there's no reason why you couldn't take tough timestamps and publish it on Keybase, for example. Sorry, no. I mean Bitcoin blockchain. That's what Keybase does. At least they were doing it. I don't know what they're doing it now. I don't know what they're doing. I've opened some tabs for in Toto and Tough. Great, fantastic. And please reach out to our channels. We're all on the CNCF Slack, which you should be able to join.
Okay, so what's left is just the thanks comments.
Ah, great, the grandmother stories. Yeah, I've been sort of abusing them. I've used them too many times, but hopefully it's still funny.
Oh, there's one more question.
Yes. What's the usability equivalent of Let's Encrypt for Tough? Very good question. That's basically what we're trying to do with. So let me go to this slide. Remember this in Toto plus some and SIG_store. This stuff is coming to SIG_store, which you might want to look at also. SIG_store.dev. It's a project from Google, Red Hat, and Purdue University, among others, where we're trying to bring this thing that I was talking about, combining the power of in-toto and Tough and SIG_store to everybody. Datadog has been the first to do it in the world using all three, but we're now trying to democratize stuff, giving you easy tools that open source projects can use for themselves.
Now I see that there are no more questions, are there? I don't see any more questions.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen.
No, great. Thank you, everyone. Really a huge honor and pleasure to be able to present to my fellow Malaysians. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I'll end the broadcast here. Thanks a lot.